I want to open up real quick. If anybody has any like initial questions or something they wanted to talk about or had on their mind, I'm going to go there first. I do have something to talk about, but anybody got any questions on anything or something that you wanted some clarity on from last week? Going once.
Cowboys go to the playoffs.
Oh, dude, the Cowboys they're gonna lose in the first round like they do every year. Just because they're 2-0 doesn't mean anything.
No, I know. They choke in the playoffs every year.
I grew up a Cowboys fan, but just you gotta embrace the truth. We'll see. They could change, but
it's only been like 30 years since Troy Aikman.
Yeah.
I don't know. 30. That was a pretty good win. Just saying.
Yeah, hey, they come out swinging. So.
Yeah, well, they choke every year, but they do it every year. They made the playoffs and they choke. Yep. 30 years.
All right, so I'll open up again for questions at the end, but I'm gonna just kind of get into it. So if you're taking notes, if you want to write some things down, I'm gonna talk about the psychology of the in-home appointment. So I think there's psychology behind leads in general, but there's also psychology behind the in-home for what we're doing. I think it's important to remember how we're thinking about it, right? So there's really three things you're doing throughout the whole appointment, throughout even when you initially make contact with somebody and say, hey, Mike, I got your request here, getting back to you. I need to get you the information. What you're doing is you're telling people who you are, you're telling them what you do, and you're telling them how you can help them. Those three things. So there's a lot that goes into that, but that's essentially what you're doing. And you are leading the conversation. So like if you just think about any establishment you go to, any good experience that you've had, you've had them. Like I would do some homework and write them down. Like one of my favorite experiences when we were in Paris, we went to this restaurant that Mike and Michelle went to. I don't know how old y'all were when you went to it, but
28.
What'd you say? 28?
28.
Okay. Anyways, when you were younger, you went to this place and it was cool. Just the fact that you had been there before and we were in Paris. Also, we went to the show called the Moulin Rouge, and like the show was great, but the way that you were directed, like they led you, they were telling you exactly what to do so that the show would be the best that it could be for you. Does that make sense? Like we still had to enjoy the show, but there were people leading us is the point that I'm making. And if you think about times or experiences in your life where you're like, man, I'm enjoying this, somebody is leading you through that process. Okay. So it could be at a restaurant, the server's really good. They're the ones kind of dictating what's going on, right? I'm just pointing out one that was impactful for me, right? I mean, there's plenty of them and that I've had experiences with, but the point I'm making is you're a leader. So if you feel like, I'm not really sure like how to tell someone, hey, here's what we're going to do. That's cool. It's normal to feel that way, right? You can talk to somebody and go through like your appointment process, which I know, Anna, you've done multiple times. I know all of you on the call have. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you're going to be saying, hey, Mike, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to lead you through this process without being like super direct, but that's really what you're saying. And that's what people are asking from you. So again, it's who you are, what you do, and how you can help. So to kind of start with some basic psychology, I like to think of it as because when we're meeting somebody new, whether it's virtually or in person, we do a lot of phone stuff. We really got to slow down to accomplish what we're trying to do. What do I mean by that? I mean, we really got to dig into the questions we're asking somebody when we're doing an appointment, when it's the first time we spoke to them, versus if I spoke to them 6 months or a year ago. It's totally different. Okay. That makes sense. Like, it's just a different conversation. It's not, you've already, compared to someone you spoke to a year ago or 6 months ago, it's just a different conversation. So how I like to think about it is, I need to get to know, like, in order for me to tell this person who I am, I need to get to know who they are. Right? So how do I do that? How do I come from a place of genuinely wanting to know who they are? I think about it like this: like, if Mike or Michael would send in a lead to me, I'm like, hey, this guy is just like my uncle Brooks I hadn't seen in 6 months. So I'm going to start the conversation like that. Even though I don't know this guy, that's how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to be like, hey, Michael, this is Jonathan. How's it going? Right? Like, and this is the in-home part. I'm not saying to just say, how are you on the phone when you're trying to book an appointment, to be clear. But on the in-home, it's like, hey, I'm Jonathan. Nice to meet you. How you doing? How's your day going? Are you from this area? What brought you here? How's your family? Right? That's questions I would be asking Brooks if I saw him. Like, what's new in your life? Right? And I'll be really interested in it because I like Brooks. He's a cool dude. Right? So it could be anybody that you like in your life. That could be a family member, could be a friend that you've had a relationship for a long time. Think about that person and how you would talk with them after you hadn't seen them in a while, and apply that to your appointment. It'll really help you. So that's the initial part. For me to tell them about me, I got to get to know who they are. Okay. Now you might say, well, this guy's like, get to the numbers, right? You could be thinking that. And if they say that, that's cool. Be like, hey, that's fine, Bob. I'd like to get to the numbers, but hey, if I don't really get to know you, I might miss something. So if you don't have, 10 or 15 minutes now, happy to reschedule. I've got other people I need to see. I need to make sure that I'm not missing anything, man. If I just get to the numbers, I might miss something. I'm actually trying to help you. If I can't help you, I'll be the first to tell you that. So that's a good way to respond to that. That I've really not had a pushback from. Or they'll say, yeah, man, I'm just tied up. I only have like 4 minutes. I really don't have time to actually listen to you, which is good if they say that, because you don't want to run through something with someone when they've halfway into the conversation, right? So that's kind of the initial chunk of the appointment, right? And that's the psychology behind it. So before I get to the second chunk of it, you could even go further back if you needed more psychology behind chatting with the person. You could go back to just imagining in your head what they did to send in that request. Like, literally just, you could write it on a sheet of paper. You could just think for yourself, draw a picture in your mind of, like, what are some ways this guy or this gal filled out this request? Could have been, hey, man, this guy works 60 hours a week. He got home. He sat in his lazy boy to watch his favorite TV show. And his wife was like, hey, hey, Bill, go check the mail, please. And he's like, I love you, so I'm going to do it. And he goes and checks his mail, and he sees a letter in there about what you're going to talk to him about in 2 weeks. And he thinks to himself, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe his uncle passed away last week. Maybe his son was diagnosed with something. Like, we have no clue what has gone on in people's lives. Something prompted him to fill it out. It could be, now that you might say, well, what about an online lead? It's the same thing. Something popped up on his phone, or he was looking through something, and he took enough time to fill it in, is the point. And I'm not sure why, right? I mean, that's what we have to find out in the second chunk of our in-home, but there's a reason why. And he closed the letter up after he signed it, licked the envelope, or like the envelopes we've been using, he ripped the thing off because we're sending out like 300 letters. We weren't gonna lick all of them. Thought that was pretty cool. I actually thought, I was like, we're sending out 300 letters. We're gonna have to lick all these. And Mike was like, no, man, we're just gonna get the ones that are like have the sticker on them. Like, this is brilliant. Anyways, that was a squirrel. I have ADD sometimes. So this person responded. So what I'm saying is, you can imagine there's a reason why, and our job is to figure out why they sent it in. Does that make sense? So that's going like super deep with it, but it is fact. Like, there's a reason they did it, and you're the one that's talking to them. So why would you not invest all your energy 100% in front of that person to find that out? So the second chunk of the deployment is digging into that reasoning after you've told them who you are and gotten to know who they are. Then you're going to spend time figuring out what are they. One real simple thing you can write down is like, what did their parents teach them about money? That's a great question. And it might be a little bold, like for the first question. You could structure it like saying like, hey, how did you, so like, I could talk to you for hours, but like, I want to kind of get to this information. I know you sent this in. I know it's important to you. Like, tell me a little bit about how like you grew up. Like, what is your understanding of insurance or retirement? Like, what makes you tick? Right? I guess that's a more less aggressive way, but you can, if you get to know them, you can say, hey, what did your parents and grandparents teach you about money? That's a great question, because there's probably a reason they are thinking the way they do, right? And listen to them. And then you can ask them even more questions like, well, why do you think that? Like, is there a reason behind it? Right? So a lot of times in this business, people either are taught that it's important by someone that they respect, or life taught them, right? They had to take care of somebody in their family they really cared about, that they really loved, and now they're scared that it could happen to their family, so they're trying to take some action, right? Someone reminded me, like, the only reason people do anything is really for love or for fear. I mean, if you don't like the word fear, you can just say loss, right? They do it because they love something or someone, or they're trying to protect from losing something. That's really the two reasons. And if you think about it, it is kind of true, right? I mean, people do stuff because it's fun, don't get me wrong, but getting a product or a service, typically those are the two reasons. So we're trying to figure out, where is this person at in that process? So those are some good questions. And then you can dig more, like, okay, what's the specific reason you sent this in? Because you don't want to get too like in the weeds about all the type of things that people can get, right? Which you can go there and then you get nowhere. So you kind of want to lead that question into, okay, this was a life insurance or a final expense request, for example, right? So what's the reason you sent this in? What's your experience with this, right? And then camp out there, right? And figure out, what does that look like for you? Like, how does that, like, if something were to happen to you 2 weeks ago, and as is today with where you stand, and I'm talking to your son, what is, like, how's that conversation from you being gone make you feel now, thinking about how that looks as you stand now, based on your experience in dealing with this with other people in your life, or maybe just your friends? Like, how does that make you feel? That's a good question. Is it direct? Yeah, but it's like I'm really trying to understand where you're at, and I want to know exactly what that looks like for you. Because maybe someone, all they care about is just having enough to cover $20,000. Well, that's good. Now you can address that, and you don't have to push something on them that necessarily may not be important to them. Does that make sense? Or at least that day. Something more could be important in the future, for sure. But doing that definitely helps address what's important now. And then you can continue to ask more questions. You know, I mean, you don't really have to if they open up at that point, but you could ask, okay, well, if for a funeral, for example, if they're talking about final expenses, you could say, are you leaning towards a cremation or a funeral? A funeral, okay. Do you know about how much that is going to cost you or your family? And then they're going to tell you what they think, right? So you're just basically what you're doing is you're telling the client indirectly, this is what we're doing. Does that make sense? So their experience is a good one. Because at the end of the day, you may have an appointment out of 20. You're not going to sell everybody, but at least you're going to figure out, hey, they really, really don't actually need this, which is very rarely the case, right? If you slow down and ask good questions, it's very rarely the case that they don't need it, because they wouldn't have inquired about it. They would have taken care of it with someone they know who does insurance. Or they would have read articles and taught themselves and said, I don't need assistance. What they're saying is, I need to be led in a direction, so this is a good experience for me, right? That's the psychology behind it. So then from there, you can just say, well, look, the last part of it is, how do we get you funded? Which in another way, you could say, how can we get you approved, right? In our business. Like in other businesses, it could be, we got to get you funded. With us, it's, hey, these look good, but right now we just need to see if you're going to qualify for something that would be comfortable for you. You can make changes to this if you're approved, right? So let's figure out, if you're approved, which of these options would make sense for you, right? And let them decide, and then move to getting it approved, which would be, hey, what's your license, all that stuff. So I know I kind of sped through that, but that's the psychology behind it in 3 chunks. I just basically pulled 3 chunks out of the presentation. So I hope that helped on how you think about it, because ultimately, like in my experience, I've got a ton to learn. I'm always going to have a ton to learn. It's never going to stop. But the people who are 100% invested in their meeting with the client always do better than the person who is 80% there and 20% they're thinking about something else going on. That's what I've found. And it's tough to do. But if you think about the psychology behind why you're doing it, it will help you put all your energy into 45 minutes with a person, instead of, I got this going on over here, I'm kind of talking to this person, kind of thinking about this, right? I found it's just harder to get more business when you're not 100% engaged, which I'm doing my best to be right now, right? Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to put all I have into this team meeting 100%, right? Another thing is, it's when you do that, you're shooting straight with people, right? So if you think about people who last in business, or if you think about people that you've respected in your life, or people that, even yourself, man, like if you've been in this business for a long time, like you could, refer to yourself. The fact of the matter is, people who shoot straight last the longest and stay the most successful. The people who are trying to like weasel in and weasel out of sales don't last and don't stay the most successful. It's just kind of a fact, right? So what this helps you do when you think about the reasoning behind it, it helps you be straight, but be very kind, genuine, but also be like, hey, this is what we're doing, right? And this is why we're doing it. This is who I am. This is why, you could even share your story on the who I am part, because all of us have one to some degree about an experience that we've dealt with finances or insurance, right? So that's it. If anybody has questions or anything like that, that's what I had to share tonight.
Jonathan, will you ever ask them leading questions? I mean, if you're talking to a 40-something-year-old who says, well, I want to make sure I have money to leave for my teenage daughter. Okay. Well,
yeah.
A 40-year-old should also be concerned about retirement.
Yeah.
And will you ever lead them there, or will you let that close if they don't bring it up?
So that's a great question. I think the reason they sent in the request is what you address always first, right? So yes, you could ask, hey, do you want to leave money behind based on the lead that's sent in? That's a fine question to ask. But talking about leaving money behind or getting insurance, and then at the same time saying, hey, also retirement? Let's talk about that. Typically doesn't work out because it's too much information at once, so people don't really make a decision. So what I've found works best is address what you're there to address, which is the insurance. And at the end of the appointment, you can say, hey, you're young and healthy. Our office also helps people with retirement. I'm going to get back to you once this is approved. You could say that. I don't even bring that up. I bring it up when the policy gets approved and they're looking at, and I go through the insurance plan with them, because it's given them time to think about the importance of what they just did, right? And they can digest that. And then there's been enough time where I can bring up an IUL or a retirement plan. That's what I've found looking at all the appointments I've ran, all the different approaches I've taken. It's worked out almost all the time when I bring it up a week or two later, like you're saying. So I'm always just trying to address that one thing, which, like you said, a leave behind question could be final expense. So that's a great question to ask. But I would try to avoid getting too in depth about different stuff we do other than what you're there to talk about. Does that make sense, Bob?
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Joe.
You're welcome. Any other questions, concerns, or any stories you guys have from the week? The people business is fun, man. It's interesting.
Well, no.
Go ahead.
I've been practicing speaking to warm market. And these people are primarily people I know a lot about. I mean, I don't need to ask my brother how many kids he's got. I don't need to ask my brother what his wife's name is. I know a lot of those things. I'm very uncomfortable asking my brother, well, how much do you have in savings? How much do you have in CDs? What do you got in the stock market? I mean, the financial questions, I'm very private about. Somebody asks me those questions, I'm not sure I'd answer them. I'm not sure how I feel if they asked me.
Mm-hmm.
So, particularly in a warm market where a lot of the information,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to go with some of that.
So it's a good question, and it's normal to feel that way. I think you have to discern your relationship with that person, right? You know what I mean? So if it feels uncomfortable, you can at least let them know what you're doing, right? And continue to talk to other people, right? A lot of times just staying in the business for a period of time, just simply by when you see them again, they're like, hey, are you still doing that insurance thing? And you're saying, yeah. A lot of times just being consistent is all someone's looking for. Like I can think about several clients of mine that like I didn't really do anything. Like I can't think of anything I really did except stay in touch with them and just continue to tell them what I did. And now they're just like asking me to help them with everything and spending $1,500 a month on a plan, right? But just because I just stayed consistent with who I was, and I didn't I just said, hey, reaching out to you. Does that make sense? Sometimes with those certain people, you're not going to get them even in the first year, right? Same with me. But that's where talking to more people helps with that process. So you have someone else to talk to with maybe a lead or anything like that. But I guess the only question I could give you with your brother is if you feel uncomfortable asking him about what's in your account, you could say, are you happy with your investments right now? That's a good question to ask, right? Or are you happy with where your retirement is headed?
Nobody's happy in today's market.
Well, yeah, I mean, you never know, right? Let him answer that, right? And then that's more of him opening up to the conversation of seeing what other option might be available to him. That makes sense?
Yes.
And then just continuing to write down questions you come up with, ask the questions, and if they, continue to ask the ones that work and the ones that don't really lead anywhere, ask less of those, right? A lot of it's that, a lot of it's just consistently trying week after week. So that's what I would tell you to practice. Maybe approach it from that angle.
Thank you.
And let other people help you out too. Like we have a lot of people available in our organization that can assist you on appointments you feel uncomfortable with, right? And the burden doesn't have to be on you knowing everything. So
and that's another different problem.
Yeah, we all got problems, man. We all got room to grow in our own right, where we're at in our business and our personal life. So it's we're all way more alike than we are different, So just keep moving, keep asking questions, you'll get better. So, but looks like we're coming up on time. I don't know if you had any closing thoughts, Michelle or Mike, but
I think it was a great call. I took some good notes. Slow people down.
Mm-hmm.
Letting them know you don't want to miss anything. Just really trying to help them. Why did they get it? Solve the problem at hand. I heard you say that several times, and I think a lot of times as agents, we try to get ahead of ourselves and we want to solve all their problems today, but we just really want to help them solve the problem they think they have today. And
Right.
I think that's huge. And just be kind and genuine and be straight with people. I mean, it's a great call. Thank you.
Welcome. It helped me out too. I was like, man, I got to come up with something good. So we're all learning. So y'all have a good night. Love you guys.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Take care.
See y'all.